I am so grateful and fortunate to be gathered here with such illustrious patriots of this great nation of Korea. I left this land when I was only 4 years old. That was 38 years ago. But because of my parents' great love for this country and its heritage, Korea has stayed alive in me and in my heart, no matter where I was and no matter where I grew up. One thing that I realized is which really captures the essence of the Korean people, is their universal character that has the capacity to digest the diversity of the human family. 그렇게 생각해서요? 저는 그렇게 생각만 안 하고요, 그렇게 믿고 있습니다. If you go traveling around the world today, in every corner of the world, no matter how small or how remote that region is, there is a Korean living there. There is no place on this world that God has given to us that a Korean has not put their footsteps on. From the darkest continent of Africa to the rich diversity of Latin America to the magnificence of North America to all of Asia, there is not one place on this good earth that a Korean has not made their home. Yet think about it. If you look at the nation of Korea, it's such a very small nation. And when you come here to Korea, it seems like Koreans are only consumed with the issues that are happening in this nation of Korea. Yet when you travel the world, and I'm so grateful that I had the great fortune to be able to travel the world. And I go to every single corner of the world. There I see a Korean who has planted his roots and made that nation his home. Yet even if they live in that land, their heart is still tied to the homeland of Korea. The culture, the tradition, and the language of Korea. 와, 대단한 분들입니다. Yet that pioneering spirit, the spirit to not only be the ambassador for this land and this culture, but to pioneer new spaces, new areas in the world, and to plant the seed of the pride of what it means to be a Korean. Something that is part of our DNA. We have this adventurous spirit, this bold spirit, the spirit of entrepreneurship, of leadership, that is the energy and the drive behind the Korean people, and especially the Korean miracle in the last half century. We're also a people of tremendous dignity. We are capable of going to any region of the world, however poor, however bad the situation is, plant our seeds there, make our investments there, and make that part of the world become prosperous and a place that everyone wants to live in. That spirit of Korea is even recognized in America today. As Korean families went to the poorest, most desolate neighborhoods in the American cities and planted the seeds there and brought about a renaissance within those regions of America that had tremendous poverty, no hope in future. They didn't ask for a handout. But 주세요 그렇게 하는 것보다 maintaining their dignity, recognizing that merit is based upon the sweat of the brows and the hard work that they put into that community. They, from the ground up, from their blood, sweat, and tears, brought a renaissance in every desolate neighborhood in American cities across North America. This, I believe, captures the spirit of the Korean people. 여러분도 그렇게 생각하세요? 그리고 맞는 말 같아요? 틀린 말 같아요? 저는 그렇게 믿고 있습니다. Therefore, especially at this time, at this pivotal inflection moment in history, when so much hangs in the balance, especially in Northeast Asia, the most important corner of the world. Why is this the most important region in the world? This is the region where the greatest economies exist. Japan, China, Russia, Korea, the United States. More than half of the economic activity of the world exists in this region of the world. If there was ever a moment in time when there was conflict in this region, it will have devastating consequences for the entire global economy. Yet at the same time, this is the most volatile geopolitical region in the world. This is a region where the Cold War has not ended. The Cold War has ended supposedly in the early 1990s, but it has not ended here in the Northeast region. Tell any Korean family today that the Cold War has ended, and you are spitting on the face of families that are split today. Although we are one people that is divided, north and south. Yet, imagine the devastating toll of the Korean Civil War or the Korean War that has not ended. Technically, the war between North and South Korea has not ended. There was no peace treaty signed by both sides. It was an armistice that ended the conflict. Yet technically, the war between North and South Korea still exists. It has remained a house divided ever since the end of the Korean conflict, where millions of Koreans lost their lives, millions of families have been separated and has been devastated. And that legacy continues to this day. It was a conflict where 28 different nations all around the world that represented the United Nations came and spilled their blood. Yet this conflict has not ended.
유엔의 그러한 주도하에 28개국가의 그러한 그 군인들이 그 목숨을 그러한 희생한 곳이 바로 이것입니다. 그러나 그 전쟁은 아직도 끝나지 않았습니다.
The Cold War conflict, moved by the superpowers of back then, the Soviet Union, the United States, although the Soviet Union no longer exists, the war on the Korean Peninsula has not ended. So the world has gone on, and yet the plight of the Korean people and the legacy that they continue to carry on their backs have become forgotten in the pages of history. Yet, how can the greatness of this people come alive when the house that this people are part of is divided? That is why this is a time, this is the age, this is the moment where if Koreans want to aspire for the greatness that is latent within them and inherit the blessings from heaven in this inflection moment in history, this is a time in which there has to be a resolution of the North and South Korean reunification issue. 맞는 말 같아요? 틀린 말 같아요? 저는 잘 모릅니다. As a young man that was born after the Korean conflict, one could say, what do I have in terms of connection to that conflict that happened more than 60 years ago now? Many young people can say that today. Many young people, even in Korea, are very apathetic to the issue of Nam북 통일 or the reunification of North and South Korea. They ask, what does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with me? And what does it have to do with South Korea that is living in a lap of luxury? Why should I be concerned about this issue of Nam북 통일? 그렇게 생각하는 젊은 사람들이 있으면 all I have to do is remind you who you are. If you have any sense of pride as being a Korean, then you have to look into the eyes of your parents and your grandparents. You have to look to your left and to your right and look into the faces of your citizens. You have to look to the north and to the south and recognize that those across an artificial border called the 30th parallel are your brothers and sisters who share the same language, same culture, same heritage, same blood. And remind ourselves of what it truly means to be a Korean. There is a saying that blood is thicker than water, and blood is certainly thicker than water. The fate of this nation not only the South, but to the North, depends on the fate of the united Korean people. That is why this is a time in which we can bring. I was told that the older generation that directly experienced the war still has those memories vivid in their hearts and in their minds, and yearn to see the day in which the two Koreas become one. Yet, at the same time, in talking to many young people, I have seen the apathy of connecting to this issue of North and South Korea reunification.
그 동시에 또 제가 젊은이들을 봤을 때 이 남북 통일 문제에 대한 무관심이 깊다는 것을 알게 되었습니다.
So therefore, you can say there's an intergenerational split in terms of the fate and the future of this nation of Korea, this peninsula, and the Korean people. A family divided cannot live up to the potential that family has. I would add to that by saying, not only do we have to be one, we have to be one family under God. One of the things that we need to understand is the importance of breaking down all the divisions that exist among the Korean people today and the misconceptions that different people might have. 여기 어머님이 여기 계시는데, wouldn't you love to see the day? 일어나세요. Wouldn't you love to see the day when your entire family can unite together, representing Korea, and the dream of all Korean people to see this nation as one, centered upon a vision that uplifts fundamental human freedoms and fundamental human rights. 보고 싶으세요? 얼마큼 보고 싶으세요? If 우리가 보고 싶으면, the future stands in front of us. It all depends on what we do today to determine our future for tomorrow. I believe that a man of destiny, this is a time in which true leaders must arise. You know, as Asians, we believe in fate. We believe in fate, meaning that heaven dictates our life course. And as Asians, we have that culture of being obedient to the fate of heaven, that fate has given to us. The fate for Korea in this time is to build a united nation that establishes Korean leadership in Northeast Asia, centered upon a spiritual vision that uplifts fundamental human rights and freedoms. Yet in order for Korea to live up to that, it has to have an aspiration that can digest the entire world. It has to have principles and values that become the standard upon which all nations of the world look to as the gold standard of protecting fundamental human rights and freedoms. 그런 한국 만들고 싶으세요? 그런 한국 만들고 싶은 사람들 손 들어보세요. Whoa. I guess I came to the right crowd today. You can say, because I'm a young man, I'm a dreamer. Usually young people have big, big dreams. Although, by strict definition, I'm no longer a young man, I still carry on the tradition of dreaming big. Of all the dreams out there, what is the biggest dream of all? Is it a dream that can only harness the aspirations of one nation? Is it a dream that can only harness the aspirations of one region? Or should it be a dream that can harness the aspirations of all of humanity around the world? Yet, I know that it is the people of Korea that has the capacity to be able to truly own that dream that all humanity can aspire to fulfill. So what should that dream be? What is that dream? You look at the world today. The world is divided and continues to fragment more and more and more to smaller components, building up walls that separate the human family. Let them be nationality, ethnicity, race, and even religion, especially religion. There is news that is going around the world where no matter where you are, there's a young Korean leader who speaks English very well, who goes around challenging all the religious leaders of the world to come out of their religious boxes and embrace a vision that can unite the human family beyond our doctrinal differences, recognizing fundamental universal principles and values that we of people of faith all have in common. Yet, even those greatest leaders, instead of arrogantly refusing this brash young man and his challenge, they come to realize as they look upon humanity, whether they be in Brazil or Indonesia or the United States or Africa, they realize that if we are truly men of God and we believe all in one God, then we have a responsibility to humanity, where the fundamental message of all religions have been the message of peace, harmony, and unity. And yet, ignoring those fundamentals of our faith, we promoted violence, misunderstanding, based upon a narrow portion of our faith rooted in our doctrine and our traditions. They realize, as people of faith, that if I am truly to stand as a man who represents the will of heaven, that represents God, I have to be able to look beyond my own faith tradition and recognize my social responsibility to our greater humanity. We need to be one family under God. They're beginning to realize that in the great tradition of spiritual leaders that were able to transcend their own faith tradition to bring a greater message to humanity, to inspire humanity into movements for the sake of peace and the furtherment of civilization. They too realized that there is a distinction between spiritual leadership and narrow religious advocacy. Therefore, I'm glad to report that in my travels around the world, that even religious leaders now are coming to the front to lead this process for peace on earth through the vision of one family under God. When I think about the Korean people, we are a people of peace. For 5,000-year history of Korea, Korea has never been an aggressor nation. In this region of the world, Korea represented the peace of what could be Northeast Asia.
민족입니다.
We have that deep, proud heritage that allows even the people of Mongolia to recognize the historical legacy of the Korean people. The people of Japan, China, and Russia to recognize the historical legacy of the Korean people, of being a peace-loving people that have been motivated by a spiritual aspiration greater than just the Korean race, but for the entire region, and humanity. That is why as I travel the world today, many people from many different nations around the world no longer take it as granted that the Western models of leadership is the only way. They're fundamentally questioning this. A nation that they're looking to as they look around the world as an example because of the historical precedents of Korea and the Korean people. They are looking to Korea. Yet, this is what is transpiring in the world today. Yet, when I come here to Korea, there is a tremendous apathy to what is happening around the world and to the very fact that many developing nations in the Southern Hemisphere is looking to Korea as an example. They're yearning for leadership. They're seeking leadership. But Korea is not stepping up and leading them. So when I talk about leadership, we have to understand what leadership really implies. Am I talking about economic leadership? Samsung today is the largest, most successful electronics company in the world. Yet, can we rely on that level of leadership? 30 years ago, the electronic companies in Japan were the leaders in that industry. Yet, did they really have leadership in the world? Did people around the world, when they looked at Japan, say, this is a nation that I want to aspire to be like? Or were they willing to receive Japanese funding and support? So the fundamental question lies, where does leadership begin? Is it because Korea becomes a wealthy nation that Korea can establish leadership in the world? Or some say that Korea should develop its military and create the most powerful military in Northeast Asia. It is not economics or political and military might that establishes leadership. It is moral, innovative leadership that establishes leadership. For there to be true leadership, there has to be a moral authority upon which a nation stands that can inspire the rest of humanity and their brother nations around the world. That is why a vision is so important. Vision. An aspiration, a national aspiration is so important.
그렇기 때문에 비전이 대단히 중요한 것이고 그 국민들이 그 국가가 소원하는 그런 염원이 대단히 중요한 것입니다.
It needs to have a spiritual vision that captures the moral authority of a nation and inspires the rest of humanity and the brother nation around the world. 그 맞는 말 같아요? 틀린 말 같으세요? What should that vision be? What should that vision be? One family under God. 한번 말해 보자요. 제가 영어 좀 가르쳐 줄게요.
영어로 따라하시기 바랍니다.
일어나세요. One family under God. 아이고 우리 어머님들이 이렇게 찾아오시니까 참 뜨거운 그 가정 찾아온 것 같습니다. 맞는 말입니다. 그러니까 제가 그 미국하고 한국 거기 사는 한국 사람들 이렇게 한국을 위해서 우리가 뭐 해야 된다 그렇게 할까요? 오. 근데 똑같이 여기 한국 사람들도 우리도 이 나라에서 책임 맡고 이 나라 편해져 만들어야죠, 그렇죠? 우리도 리더십 해야죠, 여기서. 예. 근데 조금 더 열심히 하면 얼마큼 더 할 수 있습니까? 반갑습니다. 우리 박수 한번 해보죠요. 여기 어머니들 여기 보세요. 여기 외국 사람들도 많이 있다. Where are you guys all from?
어디에서 왔습니까?
Where are you from?
독일,
Germany? Where are you from?
혼두라스,
Honduras? Where are you from? Lithuania? Where are you
Lithuania.
from? Finland? Where are you from?
핀란드,
Spain? Where are you
스페인,
from?
폴란드,
Poland? Where are you from? Finland? Where are you from? Where are you from?
핀란드.
There's a lot of you from Finland. You know that if you're Finnish, you're Mongolian? You know you have Mongolian blood in you? My goodness. We have
Nepal.
every single nation represented here, especially a lot of you from Europe. So imagine the possibility of Korea if we as Korean people can dream once again and aspire for the greatest dream. This is a time. I was given 1 hour to speak. I think I'm getting over my 1 hour. But this is a time in which we need to dream the greatest dream. As Korean people, we need to dream a dream that can bring this nation together as one. We need to dream a dream that can inspire a region to establish peace and come together as one. We need to dream a dream that humanity, in all of its diversity, can look to and aspire to share in that same dream. And that dream is one family under God. I know that we have many academics here today. And just so for the academics, I want to touch upon one issue before I conclude. Where did the modern notion of human rights come from? One can say it came from the Enlightenment thinkers who challenged rationally through philosophy
그 이성적으로, 철학적으로 그런 생각을 한 그런
the issues of
사람들로부터
morals and ethics. Yet those ideas that have permeated through Western thought, through the Enlightenment thinkers, came together and was substantiated on a national platform when? In 1776, a nation was birthed. A ragtag colony of 13 states wrote a Declaration of Independence that did not follow any model of declarations that formerly existed in the Western world. Breaking with secular tradition, in the second paragraph, they wrote these words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights." Then later on in that declaration, they go on to say that the purpose of government is to protect these fundamental rights that were given to us not by any human institution, not by any government, but from God. And then they go on to say, if any government abridges those rights, then it is the duty of its citizens. The duty, not the privilege, not the right, the duty of the citizens to get rid of that government and to create a new government that protects those fundamental rights. That Declaration of Independence became the Declaration of Independence that led to the formation of the United States of America. Breaking with all the models of governance in that time when the philosophy was that there were divine rights of kings and that the state could dictate the rights of its citizens. This nation defied the customs and the traditions of that age and declared a new proposition to humanity. And it was from that point on that the modern notion of fundamental human rights and freedoms for our modern age was born. Yet, what is the fundamental premise? What is the fundamental premise? The fundamental premise is that it is God that gives us our inalienable rights, not any human institution or government. It is God. Yet today, even Americans do not recognize what made America great. It was this fundamental understanding of the basic fundamentals of human rights and freedoms. democracy and capitalism are but systems. They are morally neutral. The greatness of a nation lies in the morality of that national aspiration. And it was that ethic rooted in those fundamental principles that made America the type of nation that it became today. To this day, when many people talk about the American dream, many people talk about it in a sense that it is economic opportunity or going and living in a democratic nation. Many people lose the fundamental point. Remember, Nazi Germany was created through a democratic process. Democracy does not create a great nation. Dictatorial regimes in Asia as well as Latin America and Africa came to power through a democratic process. If we look at the failure in Wall Street today, we can see that once Wall Street lost its ethical, moral foundation, then the capitalist system itself is subject to erosion and decay. So what is it that makes a nation great?
다시 한번
That
그러면
makes a people great. It's its moral leadership, rooted in aspiration, rooted in spiritual principles and values that is captured through the vision of one family under God. We as Koreans should aspire to build the greatest nation, not only here in the South, but a reunified Korean nation on the entire Korean peninsula. The issue is not reunification alone. The issue is what kind of nation will come out of reunification. Will it be a nation that all the different people of the world will aspire to come to share in the Korean dream versus the American dream? Or will it be a nation that even Koreans themselves do not want to live in? I am a dreamer. I dream of a Korea where the Korean dream can be the promise for not only all Korean people, but the people of Northeast Asia and the world. Will you share that dream with me? Yes or no?
여러분들은 그 꿈을 저와 함께 꾸시겠습니까?
Will you dream that you dream with me? Yes or no? If you do, stand up and raise your hand. Let's make a pledge that we will make a difference in this nation and bring the issue of Nam북 통일 to the Korean people. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.
Let us dream the Korean dream.